to the guards to finish this off. Do you want to go first, or do you want to do Snake? And I go first, since you went first last
I can
time.
go first again.
All right. So who are your top 5 guards going into this year, John?
All right, at number 5, starting off with another guy from the division that we just talked about, which is from your Green Bay Packers, Elgton Jenkins. Unfortunately, has had a few injuries recently, but still, when the guy plays, when you talk, we mentioned versatility when it came to Tristan Wirfs. Probably the most versatile offensive lineman in the NFL. Not a single position you probably don't feel really confident putting him at, and still thinking that he's going to perform at an elite level. That's how good he is when it comes to his versatility. I mean, center, guard, tackle, you name it. Heck, maybe we put him at tight end and let him run some routes. I don't know. So Elgton Jenkins, he's at number 5 for the Green Bay Packers. Once again, I think the only thing that maybe knocks him down a bit is the injuries and the potential concern of how does he look when he's coming back. And just, we haven't seen a ton of him recently, but overall, Elgton Jenkins, when he does play, you could make the argument that in terms of just how valuable he is when it comes to the wear and tear of the NFL and guys getting hurt and being able to play your best offensive line, you can make the argument he's the most valuable there is, because if putting him at left tackle means that you're actually getting to play someone who's the better player at the guard spot, then you can do that. If that means putting him at center in order to put someone else, you know what I mean? Like, you can actually field your best 5 as opposed to having to just plug and play the backup, who might not actually even be the best guy you have as a backup. He's just the guy who plays that position. So Elgton Jenkins, he's at number 5 for me. At number 4 is Joe Thuney from the Kansas City Chiefs. He had a fantastic year last year, has not missed a step since leaving the New England Patriots and joining the Kansas City Chiefs. Ultimately, I think that he is arguably the best pass blocking guard in football. I know that might be a bold statement, but I think that the reason that the Kansas City Chiefs were able to do what they did in the passing game last year, obviously, is because of Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, but also the ability to overcome the less than stellar wide receiver play. You got to give a ton of credit to their offensive line for being able to just create more time for Mahomes to, dance around in the pocket and then escape when he needs to in order to allow those receivers time to get open. And I think that Joe Thuney was an absolute huge part of that. So Joe Thuney, I have him at number 4. At number 3, I've got a guy who's kind of been a staple of my top 5s in terms of the guard spots for quite some time, and that is Joel Bitonio from the Cleveland Browns. I really do think that he's kind of the unsung hero of the Cleveland Browns offense, because Nick Chubb gets hurt, the offense keeps moving. Throughout the years, they've had a variety of different offensive linemen, whether that be all the way back to the Joe Thomas days where Bitonio was initially drafted, all the way to these days where, you've got the 2 tackles they've got, Jack Conklin and Wills Jr. What's his first name?
Jedrick Wills.
Left tackle. Jedrick Wills. Yeah, Jedrick Wills. You've got those 2 guys to tackle, and he's still here, playing at an all-pro level. Now, the only strange part, I will say, for Bitonio last year was the fact that his 2 tackles got injured, and yet still, I felt like Joel Bitonio was that guy. So even despite the fact that there was complete turmoil around him, it felt like he was playing at an elite level. And I will say, he has been selected to 5 all-pro selections, 6 Pro Bowls over the course of his career, so clearly has the accolades to back it up. I am putting Joel Bitonio at number 3. At number 2, I have got Mr. Chris Lindstrom from the Atlanta Falcons. Really has been a revelation for that offensive line. I don't know if you remember, but there felt like times before kind of the Lindstrom days where the Falcons' offensive line was terrible. And then they get Lindstrom, they get a couple other guys, and all of a sudden the Falcons' offensive line has been really good for them for quite some time now. And then they add Bijan Robinson last year. I'm very excited to see what Bijan can do this year, with another year, learning the system, kind of understanding the way that things go, being fully ingrained into the offense, and obviously Arthur Smith is gone, to see how he looks, especially considering he's going to be running behind a guy like Chris Lindstrom. Lindstrom has been absolutely fantastic for the Falcons ever since they drafted him. He made his 2nd consecutive Pro Bowl last season, and ultimately, once again, argument that he is the best offensive or the best interior offensive lineman overall. I think he allowed the least pressures on and quarterback hits out of all guards. So he was really good in the pass game as well. And I think that he's going to be a really key force for Kirk Cousins coming off that injury and protecting him and helping him stay upright. And the reason I say there's an argument to be made that he's number one is because I will say, and I fully admit I'm a little biased here, but at number one, I've got Zach Martin from the Dallas Cowboys. I only say a little biased because I do think that it's quite clear that Zach Martin is a Hall of Famer. I think it's quite clear that Zach Martin is deserving to be at the top of this list, whether it be at number one or number two or number three, wherever people have him. But he's deserving to be in that conversation for number one for such a long time. Zach Martin, I don't know what else there is to say about him. I've said it every year we've done these lists, that one stat of, he's got more Pro Bowls than he does holding penalties. I will say last year was probably the first time in his entire career that I felt like he, like which the movie was terrible, but the whole scene where it's like, Superman versus Batman, and it's like, I know you bleed or whatever it was.
Yeah.
That felt like last year felt like the first time that Zach Martin could bleed, because there were moments, it was not consistent. These were few and far between, incredibly rare, but there were moments where it looked like, oof, Zach never allows that to happen, and it just did. So once again, they were very rare. I believe he only allowed a 5.9%, he only allowed pressure on 5.9% of pass blocking plays. So it was incredibly rare. It did not really ever happen. And he doesn't allow sacks, all those kind of things. But ultimately, even despite those small cracks that we did see last year, I've still got him at number one. And like I said, it might be my bias, it might be whatever. But ultimately, I think that when it comes to being such a key cog and truly the lifeblood of an offense as an offensive lineman, for the Dallas Cowboys, Zach Martin is that guy, 100%. And, that is shown by the fact that I think like 80% of their runs go to the right, and it's because of Zach Martin. So even though they're predictable in that regard, he's just so damn good, it doesn't matter. So that is my top five for the offensive guards.
All right. Well, I'll start with mine. At 5 is where I have Quinn Miners. Excuse me if I'm mispronouncing that, of the Denver Broncos. Had a great year last year, especially dominant in the run game. And once again, we're comparing top 5, so I say take this with a grain of salt, but solid in the pass game. Obviously better than most guards, but definitely above average in regards to pass protection. And I mean, big reason why the Broncos gave him extensions, because obviously he's been balling out and been a big part of their kind of rebuild, especially since they drafted him. And developed him, and he's been really good and kind of flourishing under Sean Payton. So it'll be interesting to see, another year under that Payton system, maybe he can be better or do more. But Miners at number 5. At number 4 is where I put Joe Thuney of the Kansas City Chiefs. Very similar to what you mentioned. I mean, so great in pass protection and solid in run as well. I mean, one of the more underrated guys, and one of the more underrated signings too, because people forget he was one of the first major signings after that tough loss to Tampa Bay, where Mahomes got abused, and he was one of their top signings, and they got him locked up then, and ever since then, I mean, line hasn't been an issue. I know there's because they've also gotten other guys, but he's been a linchpin, like you mentioned, at guard, and able to do a lot of those creative things. There's their swing passes, their creative runs, because oftentimes too, Mahomes will do some creative stuff like double fake handoff, whatever not, or to do that shovel pass that they like to do to Kelsey and such as well. So nonetheless, Thuney been a big part of their success on offense, so he deserves his flowers, and he is at number 4 for me. At number 3 is where I put Elton Jenkins, and much for the reasons like you said. Like, the versatility is unreal, and the fact that, especially at guard and center, he could basically be a Pro Bowl / I would dare say All-Pro level, since he committed to one for a whole season. But unfortunately for him, and sometimes it works against him. We move him around, and even like you said, at tackle, still solid at tackle as well, which is the crazy part. And even times last year, especially last year, he was moving around. One day he was playing center, one day he was playing guard, and then playing tackle. He's been doing this for multiple years. So it's not like it was maybe a hiccup in terms of like a 1-year anomaly where he was just playing great. No, he's done this for a couple of years and been a big reason why the Packers line has been solidified. Like you mentioned kind of perfectly about how you can truly put your best five out there as opposed to, yeah, like you said, okay, this guy he plays tackle. He knows the rules of playing tackle and such better, but and so we got to play him, even though this other guy is probably better guard, whatnot. So yeah, Elton Jenkins at number 3 for me, mainly because of that versatility. At number 2 is where I went Zach Martin of your Dallas Cowboys. I mean, yeah, like you said, he's still so great. And honestly, once we're getting to picking at hairs here, but yeah, you mentioned a couple of moments, maybe where old Zach Martin wouldn't have gone as dominated, or play wouldn't have blown up, are kind of the reason why he's at 2. So not even really truly his fault once you're picking at hairs, because I have at number 1 Chris Lindstrom of the Atlanta Falcons. I mean, just because I wouldn't say he's the most dominant run blocker at guard, but still one of the better ones. And that, like you alluded to, in terms of pass blocking, he's one of the best as well. And yeah, it'd be exciting to see, how much more he can be utilized in that system. And hey, maybe Zach Martin still bounce back too. We sometimes see that out of guys. And yeah, that is my top 5. I'll say real quickly too, Joel Bitonio, man, like he's always, I feel like, on the fringes for me. And yeah, he could easily be 5 for me, but I guess Quinn, maybe recency bias kind of plays in here, where like a little more surprised out of Quinn, but nonetheless, it was real close for me between those two.
Yeah, I mean, Quinn, he had a fantastic year. He was definitely somebody in consideration for me. Some other names that I was considering for sure. With 2 guys that their teammates are already on the list, but Trey Smith and Tyler Smith from the Chiefs and the Cowboys, they were both considerations for me, as was Wyatt Teller from the Cleveland Browns,
Yes.
the other guard for them. All fantastic years that they all had. Guy that we both left off that I was wondering if we both would, who's been on our list for a couple of years, was Quentin Nelson.
Yep.
I'll be honest, last year, sorry, not last year as in the year we just watched, but the year before, so 2 years ago, we talked about how the Colts offensive line just kind of imploded. Like, we don't know what happened. It was all the same guys. And yet, outside of, I think, Costanzo was the one who had left. But for the most part, it was all the same guys, and yet they were awful. And last year, there was improvement. They weren't as bad as they were the year before, but it still didn't feel like the dominant Quentin Nelson we saw his first few years. I don't know if you felt the same way.
I did. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why. Yeah, he would have probably been maybe 7, 8. It would have been tough. But yeah, I mean, obviously we're in agreement here. Yeah, I just felt like still wasn't up to that par, and really up to snuff to some of these other guys. So,
Yeah.
I mean, maybe second year too did once again new system again as well for him and the rest of those guys. So maybe finds his footing here. In year 2 of the Steichen offense. We'll talk about them another time. But yeah, he could definitely be one of these guys that bounces up here, especially if one of the top 5 kind of falters for either one of us.
Yeah, I agree.
So, alrighty, that'll do it for us in terms of the guards, as well as, of course, tackles. We will be back next time. Let me see what division I have, and I am forgetting. Unless I believe if I did, it's going to be the AFC South, and I know for sure it's going to be center is what we'll be ranking. I think as well as defensive tackles, interior defensive linemen. So that'll be fun. Other than that, we will be back shortly because, like I said, we're trying to get these all out before the first game of the season, which is about a little over a week, so 8 days away, 9 days away from Chiefs Ravens. That'll be fun. But yeah, we will see you all then. Hopefully, nothing crazy happens now that cuts are done and we have like I said, a little over a week till football. We should be able to catch up and stuff. But yeah, we'll see you all on the other side. Adios.